I don't know if you can really relate to this, but let me give you a little bit of an example. Let's say you are on an improvement journey. It's working pretty well when you are at home. You're really managing things very well and you're improving very fast. But now let's say that you're going on a holiday. Guess what happens to that routine? It falls apart. And then we're left wondering, how did this happen in the first place? So in this video, I will take you through what I believe adaptations to our routines based on our situation should look like and how that can be implemented. But now let's deal with the sore thumb in the room and ask ourselves why routines don't work in different situations. So if I have a routine at home, why doesn't it work if I go to a different country? And that is because routines are contextual. When we create routines, we don't create them out of the blue. They are grounded in our day-to-day life. And what is our day-to-day life defined by? It's defined by the places where we spend the most time, as well as the people that we spend the most time with. These routines are adjusted to fit this context. So if I am at home 90% of the time, then my routine will reflect my life at home. It will take into account the things that I do, and it will work around some of the issues that are common in this place that I stay to then help me improve. Then the question arises, how do these routines work in the first place? And that's a really good question to ask, because that uncovers a very key thing that makes routines work in some places but not others. Routines cannot necessarily account for every single situation that may happen. There is rarely going to be, if ever, any routine that can cover every single situation and work in every single situation. So to make routines much easier to implement, we make assumptions that help the routine work. For example, if I have a morning routine and I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning all the time, consistently, I am going to design this routine based on the assumption that I will continue to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you go somewhere else, especially somewhere that is really far away with a very big time difference, then your brain is going to take some time to adjust to that new time. Then waking up at 5 o'clock in that new place in the morning feels very different to waking up at home. In the same way, a lot of our routines make assumptions about the conditions in which the routine exists in. And based on that, this routine works, but if those conditions are not met, then the routine also doesn't work. And maybe if you think about the routines you've set before, there's going to be at least one assumption that you've made that makes it tailored to the day-to-day life that you experience the most. That, of course, leads us to exploit certain aspects of our environment in which we find ourselves most of the time to make the routine work as well as it can. And when I mean exploiting the conditions, I'm talking about taking these conditions and then tailoring your routine to use these conditions to enhance the effect of that routine, as well as the gains that you get from those routines. Now I'm speaking about all of this, but you probably are asking yourselves what we even have to pay attention to in order to judge a situation. What do you have to pay attention to be able to adapt our routines in the first place? Because when we adapt our routine, we're looking at certain markers. While thinking about this video, I've realized that there are many markers to pay attention to in a specific situation, but I've distilled it down, although not comprehensively, into 4 different markers that you can pay attention to, which will give you the gist of the situation as a beginner. For the first one, we're going to be talking about time. So if you look through your daily life, you will see a lot of preferences that you have based on the time where you do things. For example, some people will like to wake up early, some people like to wake up late, and the same can be said for the times where people want to go to bed. Some people want to go early, some people want to go late. Another classic example is going to be school. People like to do their homework the first thing in the morning when they wake up, and some people like to keep the homework until late at night. I'm not saying that they procrastinate, but they just are more active at night, which helps them to focus more on their work. To an extent, this is also supported by science, or not really to an extent, but quite overwhelmingly. I'm not sure if this is correct, and please feel free to correct me if I say something wrong. Because of our circadian rhythm, which is driven by the hormones, I think it's melatonin and serotonin, there will be times where there's more melatonin in your system, which makes you sleepier. When there is less serotonin or melatonin in your system, you will feel more active and more alert, which is the best time to do certain things. For example, if you have some activity where you need to focus a lot and have a very high level of concentration, you will want to do this activity or routine whenever your melatonin and serotonin levels are at its trough, at its lowest level. Although this is a very oversimplified version of how this all works. But not only do we have some preference based on time, but we also have preferences based on the place. Now, we can distill this into something very, very simple. If you are in a certain place that has a certain number of things of a certain nature, which helps you with a certain routine, then you're much more likely and much more encouraged to do that routine and to do it consistently. I think the best example of this is sports. If you want to work out and you have no equipment at all, you're going to feel less good about doing exercises without anything with you. But if you have, at the very least, a yoga mat or a workout mat, then it's a lot easier for you to encourage yourself to actually start something, because the prerequisites are there. Let's say you wake up in the morning, you go to your dedicated workout room and your workout mat is already laid down. It's very easy to just start working out. But of course, and a lot of people will know this, a place is almost nothing without the people who inhabit that place. To be honest, this is where we get into some of the more complex dynamics around what incentivizes what, because you have such a wide variety of people around you on a daily basis that they can incentivize all sorts of things, and that becomes very difficult to manage. This could be expressed as a very simple example. Let's say that your parents, your mum and dad, each wake up at different times. Let's say that your mum wakes up really early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, but your dad only wakes up at 9 o'clock in the morning. The effect of that difference on you and what you are incentivized to do is not exactly clear. I think we can express this as some sort of generalized statement. If you hang out with a certain type of personality, a certain type of character, and they have their own habits and routines, then you are much more likely to take on those habits and routines and follow what they follow. If you have friends who always stay up very late playing video games, which by the way is not a bad thing if you manage it well, you can absolutely do that, and it can be a lot of fun because, well, at times I've done that before, then you are much more likely to do that because that is what the context demands of you. I mean, that sounds a bit weird, but my point is that when you have these conditions that incentivizes a certain behavior, you're much more likely to follow that than do something that you don't really associate with because it doesn't exist within your specific situation, namely your day-to-day. But now we come to the main issue. What role does the encounter with different ways of living and different situations change the way you see and act on your routines? In this world, we have so many different people, and I've said that earlier in the video. But the other thing to understand is that because we are so diverse as a human species and so multicultural in a sense, we are bound to meet so many different types of people on a day-to-day basis, which also means that we are confronted with many different specific situations which incentivize different habits, routines, and activities. Of course, when you hear those opinions from different people, your own specific situation gets a little bit muddled up. As humans, we naturally take in things from other people and we process that in our heads through the lens of our own specific situation. And sometimes you get contradictory things, you get things that deviate away from your specific situation, and then you get a little bit confused. That's where we have these problems with adapting our routines, because we constantly hop between so many different situations, given that we meet up and do things with very different types of people at times, that when we try to normalize ourselves to our own specific situation, that becomes difficult. Then of course the other issue is going to be if you go from your own specific situation in your day-to-day into a completely different one. Let's say that you are an expat like me. I'm from Sri Lanka and I'm living here in Germany. Germany is my day-to-day life, and let's say that I'm going back to Sri Lanka for 3 weeks. That means I'm going to be living there for 3 weeks. That is difficult to adjust to because their situation, or the situation that I'm going to have there, is completely different. And based on that, there's a lot of adaptation that has to happen because the conditions just don't suit what I am doing here anymore. Given that we've introduced the idea of adaptation now as adjusting to a specific situation, what is the prerequisite for adapting your routines? What I believe to be the main characteristic of adaptation is making a sacrifice in some way, shape, or form. The idea behind this is that when we create routines, we create them with a specific lifestyle in mind. But when we change the situation that we are in, and if we do that quite drastically, that lifestyle may not be able to be supported in its entirety, and hence you have to accept that maybe you will be able to do less of your routines and habits than before. But if you're going to take that idea of sacrificing something and you say, I'm not ready to accept that because I'm going to lose progress, then I think we should go back a few steps and think about why we even set routines in the first place. That is because we want to make something that is not natural in our lives natural. That does not require going at the same intensity, but it requires doing it. You don't have to do things to a certain standard to be able to do it consistently. You can do it at almost any standard, but the point is that you show up. Let's say that at home, for an example, you are running 5 kilometers every day. But then for about a month, you go to, let's say, the Mediterranean. Let's say you go to Greece on a holiday, right? Greece is something completely different. You then discover that there is a 1 kilometer trail right outside of your rental, the house that you've rented for this month. You do have the opportunity to keep running every day, albeit maybe not 5 kilometers, because the trail is only 1 kilometer. You could do 5 laps, but my point is that the most important thing to consider is the fact that you can run every day. You don't have to have 5k runs every day when your situation is not the same as the one that you have in your day-to-day life. In either case, you are showing up. Therefore, we should maybe not even see switching situations and adapting to them as a sacrifice, but rather a continuation of our consistency, our continued efforts. I think it makes sense to round everything up with an example from my own life. So for the past couple of years, I've been going to London many times a year to play cricket. So usually these trips would be around 4 days, but these days would be packed. They would be busy. For one, London has a slightly different time zone to Germany, and in London the conditions are vastly different. I'm in a hotel. I often come home very late. I often have to eat things I'm not used to eating on a day-to-day basis. I often have very many distractions around me to stop me from doing my habits and my routines. For me personally, it was very important to maintain my meditation habits, my journaling habits, continue video editing, eat somewhat healthy, or still be healthy, have a healthy bodily function, and have a healthy nighttime routine. Of course, I had to take into account the sacrifices that I will have to make. Still, the big thing that I need to take out of the habits that I want to keep is the essence. What do I stand to gain from doing that? And how can I express that in a different way? For example, with a healthy nighttime routine, I am trying to wind down. I'm trying to basically eliminate all of my mental stimulation. And so I want to adjust my nights so that I can do that. Of course, that becomes very difficult if you look at a regular hotel room, which has a TV right there in front of the bed so that you can just watch whatever you want. So it requires a certain level of control. But now, at least we know for the healthy nighttime routine that I'm trying to reduce my mental stimulation. So how can I achieve that? For example, when I get into the room, I can try to shut off my phone. That's just an example. I can try to hide the remote control so that I don't intuitively think of it. If I do end up grabbing the remote, I could put a sticky note on it with a clear reminder and using very direct words that I should not touch it and that there is a certain value to not turning on the TV straight away, focusing more on myself and being in the present. So as you can see, I've taken the essence of what I wanted to carry with me to London and I've created some workarounds to make it easier to commit to a healthy nighttime routine. And in that same way, I would approach all of the other routines and habits that I want to create for myself. At the end of the day, the big thing is going to be being more alert and aware of the potential obstacles and assumptions that you will have to make about the way that you will go about your day when you are reformulating these routines and habits. It's very difficult to defy those by just saying, I don't care that these things are there, I'm just going to do whatever I want and I'm going to do things the way that I do them at home. But at some point you're going to be driven to such an extent where you feel so much anguish that you will end up just skipping the habits and routines altogether. And that's the worst possible outcome. That's not what we want, hence why we need to respect the situation first and foremost before we try to impart our own routines and habits while adapting those to fit the situation. And here we go, we've talked about adaptation, and I hope that I've given you some points to think about when you are going about your own day, when you meet these different situations. This is often very difficult and I completely understand, but when we put ourselves into those situations, we will start realizing that it's not all that difficult to find a workaround. This whole exercise is about removing the tunnel vision that you may have when you get pushed into a corner and just being open to doing maybe some weird things to adapt the essence of your routines in this new situation. Thank you so much for coming along today. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate you liking the video, subscribing. If you have any feedback, which I really do need at this point, please do put it in the comment section below. I will shout you out in the next video if you do that. Think about all the things that I've said, the way that I've communicated it, my examples, and let me know where I could do a little bit better. But without further ado, I'm gonna let you go into your day. Have a great time, stay safe, take care, because you absolutely deserve it. You deserve the best. Until the next video, cheers.